Hello, my fellow readers. It's iDarkSymphony777 with another fan fiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story. And finally, excuse me, I had some pip. Finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, the fanfiction I am reviewing today is called Resident Evil Project Lucifer. It's written by Hyperactive Hamster of Doom. That's the author's name, Hyperactive Hamster of Doom. With a name like that, come on, you gotta lay in so much ham. Oh yeah, dig it, Randy Savage. Now, Project Lucifer is actually a fanfiction I mentioned before when I did my review of Darkness Arises Redux. I said that story, Project Lucifer and Darkness Arises Redux are my two personal favorite Resident Evil fanfictions. And I thought since I did Redux last year, I might as well talk about the other coin this year and talk about Project Lucifer. So, Project Lucifer is kind of a unique distinction in terms of why I like it, because for one thing, I'm a big fan of drama stories. Like, if you actually look through all the stories that are like labeled as Better Off Alone tier, they all have some element of drama involved in them. And you're probably thinking, then why do you like Project Lucifer so much? It has to be drama then. It's like, not quite, because there are always exceptions to the rules. For one thing, we had not being mailing. It was another. No. Yeah. All the Better Off Alone tier stories did have drama, except I think maybe one. No, Darkness Arises. Darkness Arises actually didn't have that much drama. It had a little bit of drama at the end, but by and large, Darkness Rises was fairly drama-free. It was just a hardcore, really epic adventure story with some splashes of horror in it. And it did, like I said, it did have some minor elements of drama, but that was saved at the end of the story, the very tail end of the story. But with Project Lucifer, this one actually needs to be explained a little bit in detail to find out why I personally like it. So before we get into the actual review, I might as well just lay it out. So, a lot of fanfiction fandoms, if you've been reading fanfiction a long time, specifically in like certain fandoms, you'll notice a recurring theme in certain fandoms. For instance, with Naruto, there's a lot of harem stories. With One Piece, there's a lot of Peggy Sue stories where like a character goes back to the beginning of the story, the whole events of things repeat, and the person being sent back in time, usually Luffy, change events, but they usually always end up like at Alabasta because it's like the writers just give up. It's like, this is like too long. It's like too long. So, where am I going with this? Well, with Resident Evil, all the really well-known fanfictions have two things in common. One, they're very complicated. And two, they usually always involve having OCs interact with the main cast. Usually, like, for example, if a story takes place in Raccoon City, expect them to at some point in time interact with like any of the characters from Resident Evil 2, any of the characters from Resident Evil 3, any of the characters from Resident Evil Outbreak. No, not Operation Raccoon City. That game's garbage. Throw it in the trash. But you see what I'm talking about. So, for example, let's talk about the two previous Resident Evil stories I actually talked about, Enduring the Evil and Darkness Rises. Darkness Arises is a very complicated story about a wanted man being hired to go into Raccoon City at the very beginning of the outbreak, before the outbreak even like went full circle, trying to murder William Birkin, and there's lots of twists and turns. He interacts with all the cast from all 3 games over the course of the story, most notably the Outbreak crew, i.e. Kevin Ryman and Alyssa Ashcroft, because not only that, the author also literally crosses over Resident Evil 2 with Outbreak by having Kevin Ryman, Alyssa Ashcroft, and Yoko, I can't remember her last name, into Birkin's laboratory. So he's even crossing over the individual Resident Evil games in a multi-layer plot hiring scheme by Albert Wesker. He doesn't like it, and he has to go through all these twists and turns trying to find out the truth of him kind of wanting to do more, realizing that he's a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. With Enduring the Evil, you have a group of friends who see themselves as family. They go into Arklay Forest and then inadvertently get wrapped up in the events. It's not as complex or as deep as Darkness Arises, but it gets really complex fast because you got 7 original characters. Granted, 1 dies in the original. I don't know. I just found out the author, Liberius, has just started redoing, doing the remake of the first Darkness Rises. I don't know how that's gonna handle. For all we know, you can have the guy who died in the original survive. I don't know. Right now, it's just vague. But the author has big plans. He has really massive plans with twisting, while he's trying to stay as close to it being all canon. He is taking liberties with certain pieces by adding all these characters and then adding more characters and having the characters interact. So now we have original characters kind of talking to original characters on both sides, on the BSAA and Wesker's force. And it's they're all crossing over. And while it starts simple, it gets really complicated once you get into Enduring the Evil 2 and 3 and Code Veronica. Project Lucifer, on the other hand, takes a vastly different approach to what makes it memorable. Instead of a ridiculously overly complex story full of very deep characters and thrilling moments and epic crossovers of the characters interacting with the Resident Evil games, we got an overly simplistic story with a lot of B-movie vibes. So with Resident Evil, most people either think of it as 2 things. They either like the part where it takes itself seriously, if you take a lot of the events of Resident Evil 4, a lot of the events of Resident Evil 3, and Code Veronica, and they like that super serious horror vibe where they get scared. It's you don't know what's going to go up, or you have the contingency of fans who like it for the very over the top norm that it is, because Resident Evil, was actually based off old school B-movie horror movies, B-horror movies. So think of Tremors, but it's a game. And Darkness Arises and Enduring the Evil kind of falls into the camp of the first section, where it's they like the action, they like the horror and stuff like that. But with Project Lucifer, it wants to firmly establish itself as a very over-the-top, ridiculous story. It still has horror. It still has some scares and some action. But by and large, Project Lucifer has it stand out amongst the very popular stories by being an over-the-top schlockfest that at no point really takes itself seriously. And also does a lot of things differently from the various trends that the other popular stories do. For instance, remember how I said the previous story, Darkness Rises, interacts with the various members of actual characters, like Leon Kennedy, Jill Valentine, so on and so forth. With Project Lucifer, that never happens. Sort of. I explain more when I get to one of the characters, but I need to actually explain this before getting into the plot. Throughout the story, they never really interact with any of the canon characters. We never really see any of the characters. They meet Jill in a quick cameo when they're in the St. Michael's chapel, and Jill crashes the trolley train into the church. It crashes. They basically what happens is They see her, they see the badge, it belongs to Jill. They see her moaning because, you know, she's waking up. If you play Resident Evil 3, they think she's a zombie. They run for it. It's like, ah! They do run into Nikolai, also from Resident Evil 3. But again, that's a quick cameo. The only time they actually interact, and even then, with the Nikolai thing, they don't, it's not really that long. It's just, oh, I'm just here looking for my men. Goodbye. And he leaves. And at the end of the story, the very last chapter, they do meet Barry and Carlos and Jill, because Barry's plane kind of like crashed and broke down from the nuclear warhead that blew up Raccoon City, and they kind of crashed into the town where the characters were staying. And it's like, you survived! We thought we were the only survivors. Yeah. and then the whole ending happens. So, but while it doesn't interact with Resident Evil 2 and 3 and Outbreak, it does tangentially correlate back to a specific part in Resident Evil 1, which is actually really unique because, again, usually when the stories take place in Raccoon City, there's not really a lot brought up to the events of Resident Evil 1, except for like a mention that, oh, it was Umbrella, and then the reason that the whole STARS thing happened. That's it. That's, for the most part, that's really all that happens. But I do like the take of the twist of what the author does with a specific event. Again, it's not the entire game, it's one specific event that the author kind of ties it back into Resident Evil 1. But I'll talk about that when I talk about one of the characters. But now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the plot. So, the story actually starts a while, like around the summer of 1998 in Raccoon City. This was about a couple months before the big outbreak happened. And we're introduced to a girl named Lisa. Now, Lisa is just a normal girl. She lives in uptown Raccoon City, and she's running around, you know, trying to just wander around. And then she meets a Spanish kid, a Spanish immigrant named Jack Carpenter, who basically, him and his aunt moved to Raccoon City because his family died, because his parents died, and they wanted to get a better education. Well, his aunt wanted him to get a better education, and he thought, okay, fine, I want to learn what you Americans have, and so he moves to Raccoon City. So what happens is they actually get to know each other. Lisa's parents, who, spoiler alert, work for Umbrella, they don't like the Spanish kid because they think he's low down. He thinks he's a skater punk because Jack is a part of a skate crew called the Street Rats, who are basically, or more or less, just normal, or just skaters who just skate around the city. They don't really get into any trouble unless they get provoked first. They're just mostly content to doing just skating around, having fun, and talking. And the first half of the story is just them, of us getting to know these two specific characters, and as the shoe slowly drops, Lisa's parents slowly start staying more at work. Hint, hint. They get news reports of like people getting eaten, getting attacked by cannibals, i.e. the zombies. Jack's aunt gets bit, she dies. Lisa's babysitter gets bit, she dies. The newspapers, they kind of talk about zombies. One of Jack's friends pretends to be a zombie, gets shot in the head by a grocery owner because he thinks he was a real zombie, and he's paranoid because he was actually the husband of the babysitter. But the shoe doesn't really drop until near the halfway point of the story. I believe, yeah, until chapter 15. This is a 43 chapter story. So they don't even explore Raccoon City until chapter 15, 16. Where Lisa's friends, who Lisa doesn't really like because she doesn't really like the stuff. She's kind of that girl next door vibe, but she's not a strong independent woman. She's just really likes she's kind of a pseudo tomboy because she actually just likes Jack because he actually doesn't treat her like an uptown girl. He just treats her like, hey, how you doing? Hey, how and he just treats her like a normal kid. Like, I just want to be a normal kid. Like, can I just not be these same girls who wear all the same things, think the same things? I just want to be me. I don't want to be them. I want to be me. So let me be me. Not fake. Me just be a normal girl who just happens to spend a lot of time home alone. Forever alone. Playing Dark Souls. No, wait, Dark Souls didn't exist in that time. Or did it? Oh yes, they had Robot Dark Souls, Armored Core. But yeah. So the shoe drops at Lisa's part because her friends want to invite some people, and then they basically blown it out of proportion. The last person there was actually a zombie and starts eating everyone, and everyone dies except for Lisa, because Lisa was like the only, because Lisa kind of passes out, and that causes the zombie to kind of like ignore her, because, you know, why go for like a passed out person when you have all these screaming girls and screaming guys just going around? It's like, ha ha ha. She wakes up. She manages to kill the zombie with like a table leg. Immediately worries about. So I got distracted. I had to do something real quick. So yeah, she wakes up, kills a zombie with a table leg, and then immediately thinks of Jack because she thinks that he might be dead, and she wants to confirm what she wants, at least someone that she trusts to, you know, to kind of stick by. And so she manages to find Jack. He's fine. And they basically have a deal. They just want to get out of Raccoon City. That's what makes this story really good. This is not a complicated story. They tell you right as soon as they meet up when the zombie apocalypse is starting, all they want to do is just get out. It's like, we don't want to do any of this crazy stuff. We just want to leave. Let's just leave. But Lisa wants to have her parents come with her. Like, I don't care if my parents hate you or not, okay? I want them to be safe. And so basically the main crux is she just wants to find her parents, and she wants all of them to get out. And so they basically wander through various parts of Raccoon City. They don't go through a lot of parts because that's another thing with this story, is the fact that their end goal is the Umbrella headquarters, and it's not really that far away from where they start. So it's more they kind of get like stopped by handicaps, like the police borders, and so they have to kind of like swerve around all that. And eventually they manage to say fuck it. And they get guns. You know, they do get guns, so they start firing the zombies ineffectual. They don't really know how to kill zombies because, again, they're kids. They don't have gun skills. They hijack a car, and then they meet a woman by the name of Amber Bernstein. That's who we're going to talk about when we talk about the connections to Resident Evil 1, but we're not there yet. Keep that in mind. Amber was a member of the RPD, and so she basically still wants to upkeep her police duties, but she's actually convinced that her and Lisa and Jack are like the last people alive. So it's like, fuck the RPD, I'm just going to get you two out here. That's basically her in a nutshell. It's like, everyone's dead, I'm just going to I just want to get you two out of here. I don't care if I die, just let me save you two at least. Just let me save you two. And so Amber joins them on their little adventure, and then they come across two members of the USCB, a girl named Christina and a girl named Lavelle. I'm actually completely forgetting her name. Renee Lavelle. I was thinking of her last name for some reason. Who are members of the USCB. They're basically there to rescue people. Wank, wank, nudge, nudge. If you haven't played Resident Evil 3, I recommend not playing the remake. Play the original. And those two people are like, well, we're here to just rescue as many people we can. And they basically go along the same thought process as Amber. It's like, you three are the other ones. To us, you three are the only ones left alive, so we're just going to save you three. That's it. And so all 5 of them try and just they basically all find out the same thing. Lisa just wants to rescue her parents. The Umbrella Corporation, the headquarters, is not really that far from where they are because they just do it on an nondescript street. They go to the hospital. They find out that all of Jack's friends are dead or turning into zombies. They go to the clock tower, which is St. Michael's, and then literally the headquarters is literally like 2 blocks from St. Michael's, so it's not like. So it's literally not going far. Like, literally half of the story. The story is divided into 3 parts. The first third is just them setting everything up. The final third is literally all in the headquarters. Everything is in the headquarters, and like the second third is just literally just them getting to the headquarters. So, like maybe I would say. Let's see. The last 40, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 40. So yeah, so like the last 15 chapters is all in the Umbrella headquarters. It's all related to the headquarters. So yeah, so literally half of the story, like a third of it. So the story is not that complicated because it's just, at the end of the day, it's just this girl and guy wanted to get out, wanted to save the girl's parents because the guy's the only family member, the aunt, is dead, more likely a zombie. They come across 3 other girls and they just want to just find these parents and then get out. It doesn't really get that complicated until we get near the very end where we get a lot of complicated stuff. That's a neat thing that I like with the story. It's like, despite its simplicity, when it actually gets complex, it actually gets a little complex. Like I said, all that will be talked about when I talk about Amber. And so, the story ends with them escaping Raccoon City. They basically kind of jump off. They kind of stop a train in the middle of nowhere near like a little very small town. We get like a very hilarious moment. Oh, when they get to the Umbrella headquarters, they actually come across a Umbrella worker who's kind of like wrapped up in the old fancy. She's like kind of a scaredy cat. I'll talk about more when I get to her. But we get a very hilarious moment at the end where they realize like this train's going to like an Umbrella controlled area and I don't want to get shot. Oh, there's a little town right next to coming up. It's like, okay, we'll stop it. They stop the train. They get out. And it's like, wait! What? We gotta blow up the train. How are we gonna blow up the train? I am Commander Renee, and welcome to Grenade Training 101. We got like a hilarious montage of like Renee being a trainer, and she gives everyone a grenade. It's like, grenade for you, grenade for you, grenade for you, grenade for you. And he basically does like a lesson. It's like, well, to make sure grenades can kill you. Make sure you to pull the pin and you throw the grenade. Don't throw the pin. And you know, get like a little funny thing where they actually blow up the train. And then again, of course, the story ends with them trying to figure out what to do next. Jill and Barry and Carlos, they kind of crashed a helicopter in the middle of the city. They find out they're alive. It's like, you're alive! It's like, huzzah! And the story ends with them wanting to send, Jack and Lisa to like a city called Arclay, which is like the area in Arclay Mansion that was like, in the Arclay Forest was like ignored by Umbrella Corporation because of the mansion incident. While Amber, Renee, and I'm just having so many brain farts. I completely forgot what Dr. Harleach. I'm having just a complete brain fart on her name because there's like a running gag in like the third half where Amber keeps mispronouncing her name. Charlene. I think her name is Charlene. And then they decide to go with Jill and Barry and Carlos to do some stuff. So it's like, it kind of ends on a very happy note. There is a very specific plot point with involving Jack and like the main antagonist, but I'm gonna keep that part vague and not talk about that part. The least let you have some anticipation. So now we move on to the characters. We have Lisa and Jack, who unfortunately are probably the weakest characters. It's not so much the bad characters, it's just compared to the rest of the group, they're kind of like lacking. They're not bad. Like I won't deny that they're bad, that they're good. They're okay. We have Lisa, who's, like, I already described Lisa earlier. We have Jack, who's basically very resourceful, who's very stubborn, who really wants to protect Lisa with his life. They even make a deal, it's like if one dies, the other one sacrifices themselves. It's kind of a boneheaded decision because Jack kind of gets her to back out of it near the end, but it's very sentimental. They're very sappy with each other. It's very fine. The main reason to read this story is everyone else. Let's talk about this. We got Renee, who's a kooky who's a USCB. I more likely butchered that. Who's a very hilarious character in the fact she's just very over the top, but she has a really good heart because it's eventually revealed that she doesn't really want to do this, but she was forced into it by Umbrella because her sister actually got a disease that needs a lot of money in order for her to get cured, and Umbrella was the only reason why she was able to get the money to cure her, and so she was kind of forced to join against her will to keep her sister alive. She also does have some minor relationship issues where she kind of is jealous, but at the same time, she's not jealous of her sister because her parents sacrificed all their wealth. Literally, they sacrificed everything in order to keep her sister alive. And she's like, yeah, I'm jealous of her, but she's still my sister and I still love her. You know? Dr. Harleach. She's ridiculous. She's basically an Umbrella worker who was kind of forced to work on what's called Project Lucifer, the name of the story. However, she didn't know anything about Project Lucifer. She was basically just an assistant. And so they kind of kept her out of the loop. So it's like, I didn't know what was going on. And Amber's like, no, I'm gonna punch you. And she's actually kind of a younger sibling of another doctor who knew about it. And so Amber kind of attacks her. It's like, no, you lied to us. It's like, wait, I can explain. Wow, goes, oh, we're sisters. All right, I'm sorry. It's like, all right. You forgive me? I forgive you. She is also very creaky. She's like very hilarious. Probably the best part of her is her chemistry with Amber. I love the way the author wrote her and Amber. They were both the author wrote them so well together. Like made them like. It's the reason why I said this is a campy. This is like an over the top campy story. It's these two. It's Harleach and Amber specifically, especially at the end because she actually has nearsightedness, so she doesn't really see that well without glasses. And she spends like half the epilogue kind of just on a lounging chair, just talking random stuff to someone she thinks is a person, but turns out to be a cactus. And she's still relaxing when the helicopter crashes right in front of her, and she's like, huh? And then Jill comes out, and then she notices, like, it looks a little bit like, wait a minute, is that the person that they saw in the church? And then she busts into the diner, it's like, quick, the zombies have learned how to pilot helicopters! And everyone looks at her, and they look outside to see what's going on. It's like, you're not wearing your glasses! Huh? And it's hilarious. It's like, it's a very fun, over-the-top, campy stuff that fits so well, and the author wrote so well. Then we got Christina, who's like a very super serious character. I mean, she really contrasts nicely in the fact that every other character is like very goofy. Like, that I think what is a benefit with Christina as a character, because she's technically the main antagonist. She's very bullheaded, very brutish, really her way or the or Highway, it wouldn't have worked so well if everyone, and this includes Lisa and Jack, because even Lisa and Jack kind of have their goofy moments, if not for the fact that, one, Renee played off her so well by being just basically a very goofy German assassin with, like, just a really hard on her sleeve type of character, but also she contrasts so well with everyone else because she's just a super serious character and everyone is just really, really over the top goofy. And it works so well, in my opinion. And then we get to the best character, Amber Bernstein. Bar none, the best character in the story. I like Renee, but she doesn't hold a candle to Amber. So I had to save Amber for last, specifically because there's a lot of groundwork into her, because the author did write like a prequel that kind of goes into her character a lot more. So let's get started with that. So everyone knows the actual lore of Resident Evil. Do you know? Do you know? Exactly, you're plushie. You're plushie. So, those of you who don't know what the actual lore is, what happened after the Raccoon City, not the Raccoon City, the Arclight incident, the remaining members of STARS, Rebecca Chambers, Barry Burton, Jill Valentine, and Chris Redfield, and Brad Vickers. Well, maybe not Brad Vickers because he was in a pilot the entire time, so he didn't really know, for the most part, what was going on. They followed the reports into the Raccoon City Police Department to try and get a massive investigation going for Umbrella. However, the chief of police, Brian Irons, was in their payroll. So he basically kept trying to bury the investigation. Basically said all the STARS members canonically, he said they would just they did a lot of drugs and a lot of bad stuff happened, so I'm just going to suspend them. And Chris was kind of suspicious of that, because the difference between, like, some of them was like, Barry went to Canada with his wife, Brad Vickers and Jill Valentine stayed inside because Jill wanted to do an investigation on her own, and she realized that, since Umbrella's main headquarters was in Raccoon City, she'd be able to at least find it. And not to mention, she kind of suspected they were watching her anyway. Chris knew that they were watching him, and that Brian Irons was on the payroll, so he went to Europe, which leads to the events of Code Veronica. And then also Resident Evil 2, because he didn't bother to tell Claire that he left. And Rebecca went off somewhere. Like, it's like the big thing. It's like, no one knows what happened to Rebecca. We know she's still alive, we just don't know where she went after that. Yeah. However, in this story, while everything does happen, there is one small thing. And that is that Amber actually believed STARS. And you're thinking, why? One second. I hate getting distracted. So, okay. So, why was it that Amber believed the STARS members? Remember, like I said at the beginning, that there was a very specific plot point in Resident Evil 1 that ties into this. And that is that Amber was actually dating one of the STARS members, i.e., I believe it was Joseph. Hold on. I'm actually going to look up the STARS members, because I forgot the name. Because there's like two characters that have similar names. I found his name. Amber was dating Joseph Frost. So how does that tie into this? Well, for one thing, if you don't know the Resident Evil lore, or didn't play Resident Evil 1, first off, why aren't you? And second, Joseph Frost was actually the guy that died in the opening cutscene of Resident Evil 1. He was basically mauled by 3 Cerberuses, the zombie dogs, and he died there. He just basically died in the middle of the Arclay forest before they entered the mansion. Amber believes STARS simply because basically of Brian Irons' reasoning for suspending him, because they took a lot of drugs and a lot of bad stuff happened. She was dating him, so therefore she knows he don't do drugs. And so that kind of led to her being very bitter and going and actually doing her own investigation without no one noticing and finding out that a lot of the stuff that they were saying turned out to be true. So she actually did an investigation. She didn't do a big one. She just did enough to see if what they were saying was true. She found out what they were saying was the truth, and she was trying to figure out a way to actually approach this, maybe join Stars. But Chris bailed, Jill was being watched, and Brad was Brad. Again, couldn't say anything about Barry because he was in Canada, and Rebecca was like, your who knows where. So Amber was forced to bide her time, and this kind of leads to her main character arc throughout the story. She's actually the only character that actually, they all get character arcs except for Christina. But Amber's character is that she's a cop who's like a very courageous cop, because first off, there's a running theme throughout the story is where she's very, very afraid of spiders. Like the moment she sees spiders, she like freaks out. It's like, spiders. But she hates the fact that she was so cowardly, and she tries to be better, and she gets better by hanging out with Dr. Harleach. And they do their whole spiels with each other. They kind of work, like I said, they work well off each other. But with Amber, a lot of her actions are due to the fact that she couldn't forgive herself for essentially not standing up for Stars when when Brian Adams was basically throwing them under the bus and getting rid of them. She didn't stand up for them. She's still moaning the fact that Joseph Frost died, and she knows that Frost would basically tell her, said, hey, man up. You gotta help these kids, and which leads her to specifically wanting to save these two kids, because again, like I said earlier, Amber thinks that her and Jack and Lisa are like the only survivors left in Raccoon City, so it's like she's convinced that everyone else died except for her and those kids. And she's willing to lay down her life if it means she gets to keep those two kids alive. But that leads into conflict with some of her fears and her nervousness over the fact that she's technically a bad cop. She's a very good shot. Just like Kevin Ryman, she was actually considered for Stars, but all she had going for her was basically she was like a really good shot on par with Chris Redfield. That's really all she had going for her. She wasn't really that courageous. And that was a big part of her character development, of her trying to become courageous in honor of Joseph Frost to make up for Frost's death in the Arklay incident. And that leads her to like becoming more courageous as the story goes. She's still very campy. Again, the story is very campy, and so it wouldn't make sense for her to become super serious. She's still over the top. She does have a lot of funny moments. Like I said, she's the best written character of this story. That's not to say that all of them are bad. It's just Amber's far and away the best one. It helps that, she got her own prequel that focuses on her, and the sequel, which focuses more on Lisa and Jack, as well as like the rest of the crew, and like a little side. I think it's supposed to be a side story, but those two stories were abandoned. I really wish that Amber story was completed, because I actually really wanted to see more of her. But that still brings the point that Amber was a really good character. She's not among the best original characters like Helena or Jake Kavanaugh or Valkyrie or Puppy Smiles, for that matter. But she is the best of the crew, and she's a very relatable character of telling us a simple story about overcoming one's fear of wanting to be courageous. Because as you all know, the definition of courage is standing up for something, standing up for something even if you know you're afraid. Basically, the whole purpose of Courage the Cowardly Dog is that premise. Like, Courage is scared, but Courage is still going to do it knowing he's scared because he knows it's the right thing to do. That's basically Amber in a nutshell. She's terrified at all this stuff around her, but she still wants to follow her duty as a cop and is willing to brave those horrors, even if she knows they scare her, and and especially spiders, but she's still doing it anyway because she wants to protect these two kids. And that's really relatable, and that makes things very, very nice. Again, just like Christina, that actually makes her more relatable, because despite her goofiness, she is probably the most down-to-earth character of the crew. Unlike, but Christina more, but But unlike Christina, she still has those very goofy moments where you still can't take her too seriously. It's just a fun overall story. Grammar-wise, there's I think a couple grammar errors, but it's fine. Pacing-wise, this story is very fast-paced, which makes sense because unlike say Resident Evil 3, which takes us all across Resident Evil, like all across Raccoon City, this one's mostly just sequestered in like I think the Midtown area for the most part, and so it makes sense that that it would be very fast-paced because they're not really going a far distance. They don't really deal with a lot of big issues. They deal with some zombies every once in a while. They deal with some crows. They deal with liquor too. They deal with Christine. Well, Amber deals with Christina, but Christina beats the living shit out of Amber. And they also deal with Project Lucifer. I'll talk about him in a little bit. And they don't really deal with a lot of problems. Unlike a lot of Resident Evil stories where, if it takes place in Raccoon City, they deal with a lot of they deal with a lot of zombies, they deal with like frogs and stuff like that. No, this one is just, they go to a place, they see a couple zombies, they just go around it because they don't have a lot of ammo and they try to avoid it as best they can. And that's it. And then a couple chapters happen where they don't really deal with anything else, but then like something happens after that. It's very cut and paste in the fact that there's very light on enemies because all the enemies and zombies are elsewhere. So it makes sense for the story to be very fast paced, especially once they get into the Umbrella headquarters, where it's just a big building and then an underground lab where the bulk of the climax happens in that underground lab because they meet Dr. Harleach and they get there. But overall, it's very fast paced, but it's never fast enough that you're still able to keep up with everything going on. It's just fast paced because of how little room in the grand scheme of things are they condensed into, because it's just a couple streets, the park, St. Michael's, the hospital, and then the headquarters. They don't really go a lot of places. All those areas are just really close by, relatively speaking. So there's that. Would I recommend this story? I would. I 100% would recommend Project Lucifer. It stands out among all the very complex Resident Evil stories for being a simple, down-to-earth, very bare bones in terms of plot for Resident Evil fanfiction specifically, with very relatable characters. It has an over-the-top charm to it that is reminiscent of like the cutscenes from Resident Evil 1, or like anything that Burton says out of Resident Evil 1. It's like you can take this. You could be like the whole, I almost said master of unlocking, but the Jill sandwich. You were almost a Jill sandwich sort of charm to it. It's a very hokey vibe to it that still makes it entertaining, and I like that about it. And having a simplistic story in a sea of very complex stories, because again, all the really good Resident Evil stories are very, very complex and very deep. So having in this sea of complexity and sea of very, very eloquent and very, very well thought out, you just have a very somewhat silly, goofy story just smack down in the middle. It makes it stand out all that more. And I like that about this story. Favorite part. This one's going to need some explaining. So, it's the climax of the story. They meet a being called Project Lucifer. Project Lucifer was the project that Lisa's parents were on. It's basically how to describe Lucifer. Think of Nemesis. Nemesis. You know who I'm thinking about when I say the word Nemesis. But is able to adapt to a situation. In essence, he's much smarter than Nemesis, and he doesn't degrade. That was like the big thing with Nemesis. Is like as you take more damage, he was slowly degrading, and the whole point of Project Lucifer was basically a Nemesis who can actually somewhat adapt on the fly, but more importantly, doesn't degrade. That was basically the whole point of Project Lucifer. Just don't degrade. However, the big thing was Lisa's parents were basically trying to make a panacea, and were forced into it by Umbrella by saying, you either turn this into a bioweapon or we'll kill your daughter. And there is a big swerve regarding Lucifer. I don't want to spoil it. I really don't want to spoil it in the video. I won't. But I will say it is actually very genius swerve. But that's not my favorite part. The favorite part is actually how they take down Lucifer. So another big thing with like Resident Evil games is there's always like a big explosion, big thing. Like how Jill beat Nemesis, she basically took a railgun, shoved it in him, and basically got him until like he was barely functional, and then she took out her magnum and said, "Oh, you want stars? I'll show you stars." And basically just fires the magnum into Nemesis' skull. Well, with the Tyrant from Resident Evil 1, it's basically just a simple rocket launcher. With William Birkin, he basically dies in like a very, very gigantic explosion as Claire, Leon, and Cherry were trying to escape in the train. With Project Lucifer, it's a very muted way to actually defeat him, but it's actually genius in the context of the themes and how the authors present the story as a very simplistic story. So instead of doing so basically what happens is they enter a room that's basically just like a gigantic stockpile of weapons, and they realize, well, actually, they all see weapons. Like Renee's like, "Oh, we got some time. Let's get some ammo." No, they get locked in the room, saying there's a biohazard, and they have to get rid of the biohazard in order to leave. Of course, here comes Lucifer. And they basically actually do the style as like what the other characters do. So basically Jack gets like a skateboard. He's not a skateboard. Somehow. And basically skates around Lucifer trying to keep him distracted as Renee and Charlize basically riddle him with bullets to no avail, because the whole point of Lucifer was basically just smarter, more durable Nemesis. Meanwhile, Lisa and Amber, they're trying to find something to take out Lucifer. And so they come across a rocket launcher. And so they basically get Lisa and Charlize and Renee say, "Hey, we got something." And like, yeah. And so you get this hilarious mental image of these four girls all holding up a big ass rocket launcher, just like all swerving, and it's like, ha! And they try and do things, the stereotypical Resident Evil way. It's like, "Hey, badass, take this!" And they fire the rockets. But Lucifer's smarter than that, and just basically just grabs the first rocket off in his hand. He's like, Doom. And he throws it back at him. And then they scramble. It's like, oh shit. They fire two more. He knocks him out of the way. They fire the last one. It actually hits him. It does nothing. And so they're just basically panicking. It's like, wait a minute. This isn't how the movies are supposed to go. And they're panicking. And they manage to, they get more bullets from the cartons. And they basically pour more bullets. And Amber's giving up. But Lisa's not giving up. So how they beat Lucifer is actually really genius. And this is spoiler alert. So basically what happens is she opens a crate. She finds a massive Trent gun, with Lisa's idea being that she hits Lucifer with some tranquilizers, gets him to go to sleep, and they decapitate him. Amber's like, it's like the L virus. It's probably gonna regenerate the head back. And Lisa's like, and then she actually remembers something, because there's actually a cure for the L virus, and there was like a cartridge of 5 vials. No, yeah, 5 vials for the virus. And so Lisa's like, wait, if the vial says it can even cure people who are infected with the L virus, like even before they finally mutate. What happens after they fully mutate? And so Amber has an epiphany, and it's just like, we may have only one shot at this. And so they take the rest of the vials of the virus, they pour them into the trank shots. Lisa gives the sniper rifle to Amber because she's the sharpshooter. She loads up the guns, and she basically fills Lucifer with the vaccine. And that the vaccine actually slowly cures him, and he dies. And Lucifer actually dies from the vaccine. It's very anticlimactic in a way, but the reason it's so amazing is the fact that anticlimactic actually fits really well with the story. That makes it, and that even being symbolically anticlimactic, it still makes it incredibly badass because of the theming and the story structure and how the story was presented as a more simplistic story of just them. So it makes sense for them to beat the bad guy instead of doing this whole gung-ho more DACA thing. They do something simple like just pump it full of vaccine with a non-threatening gun. It's so simple that it's actually genius, and I love that, especially since it's Amber, because she finally got her time to shine at the end, despite the fact, her whole chick was like wanting to become courageous, but still kind of cowardly. Just seeing her with that sniper rifle, firing the gun, firing the tranks, and slowly curing Lucifer. It's a really, really cool moment that, most people probably won't like because it's just, you didn't blow up, you didn't blow him up, you just shot him with some needles. But it fits. It absolutely fits, and it turns what would otherwise be a very kind of wimpy ending into something completely badass because of just how much setup the author goes into it and how much he actually uses that idea. It's a really cool moment. And I guess that's my review of Project Lucifer. I love this story. I have a soft spot to it. Do I think it's better off alone tier? No. But I do think this is actually a very, very entertaining story. It's not supposed to be serious. It's supposed to be a campy enjoyment of just very over-the-top fun. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's what fan fiction is supposed to be. Sometimes you don't want to look for a very super over-the-top serious story. Sometimes you want to look for something goofy. And this story does that in spades. I really wish that... I really wish the prequel was finished, because I would have loved to do a review of Double Amber. And I even read some of Double Amber, and it's actually way better than Project Lucifer, because it gave us more depth into Amber and her relationship with Stars. And if that story was complete, and I only read like the first 3-4 chapters, and if it kept if it kept what it was going for, that story would have been better off alone tier alone. That story would have been far just going full Hail Mary right there. But am I forgetting something? Vivian, am I forgetting something? What am I forgetting? Oh, changing it, right? Oh, right. I forgot. What would I change? Nothing. Like, literally nothing. Everything, like, it would just ruin it. Like, I was like, you can make it serious, but then what would be the point? You just make it into, like, every other Resident Evil fan fiction. The biggest point in his favor is the fact it's just an overly simplistic, goofy fan fiction. In a fan fiction fandom where everything's like super serious. No reason to rock that boat. So, that is my review of Project Lucifer. I will see you next time in some felicitations. Oh. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.